Endurance Junkie Podcast, episode 58. Hey Junkie, welcome to another episode of the Endurance Junkie Podcast, the show where I will be interviewing some of the fastest, smartest, and most inspiring people active in the endurance world today. Parkour, or freerunning, is a holistic training discipline focusing on using the human body for propulsion over obstacles and can include running, swinging, climbing, and jumping. Dan Edwards has studied practical movement and physical fitness his entire life. He is the co-founder of Parkour Generations, the world's largest organization for parkour and freerunning, and now travels the globe to teach and help the sport grow even more. Dan, thanks for taking the time to come here on the show today. Now, for those of us who don't know you, can you tell us a bit about yourself, your sporting background growing up, and how you ended up in parkour?
Sure, buddy. Yeah, my background is in sort of fighting arts and sort of practical skills, I guess, since I was a kid. I started down the road of martial arts when I was about 8 years old, and I was just really interested in a sort of understanding what the body and mind can do, what my body and mind can do, and really finding out in terms of practical skills what it could do. I was always really interested in that stuff rather than sort of kind of arbitrary sports or activities that would sort of, I don't know, felt a little bit kind of invented. I wanted to find out what the human body and mind can actually do, in the real world. So I was always drawn to that kind of aspect of martial arts and sort of the combative element to it rather than sporting versions, and that kind of took over my life really from about the age of 8 or 9, and I went into I sort of sidelined also into like survival skills and movement disciplines that would help and support the martial arts, etc. And then I found parkour when I was probably about 25, something like that, and it was very young then and very new. And very few people knew about it. This was before YouTube, and it was just a sort of instant recognition, instant realization that that was a really truly practical discipline, that really tested everything you've got in the real world, and I loved that immediately. I was drawn to that, and right from the first time I came across it, I began training, and from that first day of training, I then have trained it every day since then, pretty much. So. It was a natural growth, I guess, of the desire to acquire practical capability and competence with the body and mind.
So where did that love for the martial arts come from? Were your parents involved in that, or?
No, not at all. Not at all. It came from probably nothing deeper than a love of Bruce Lee movies and action movies when I was a kid. I grew up with that generation where that stuff was hugely popular in the 80s, and so it was just kind of probably nothing more profound than that. And I was raised on tales of heroes and comic books and fantasy stories and sci-fi and martial arts and action movies and all that stuff that young boys love or did love back then. And it was just kind of fueled this desire to sort of I guess replicate some of it and try to find out if one could make oneself that competent, and so it was just a natural progression from there. And then as I got into it and understood the origin of the combative arts and the sort of philosophy of violence and things like that, as I grew up in my teenage years, then I sort of looked into it deeper and I suppose began to study it, in a more serious way than just wanting to be Bruce Lee. Hopefully, anyway.
Were you competitive in some form there, or was it just training?
I was a little bit in my early sort of teenage years, 13, 14, 15. I fought in the sort of all schools karate championships in England. And won that title a couple of years in a row. But then I think when I was 15 or 16, maybe 16, I kind of gave up on that front. And sort of by then I'd realized that the sporting element of it wasn't what I was interested in at all. And it was very, very far removed from the reality of of combative training. It was fun. It was a really interesting, a good introduction into that sort of stuff, I suppose. But pretty early on, I realized that wasn't where my interest was, and I dropped competition after about the age of 15, 16.
Yeah. So is that what drew you to parkour and free running? That it's not competitive at all?
I guess, back when I started, obviously, whenever I started parkour, it was 2002 or 3, something like that. There was no idea that it was that it could be a kind of a sport or an activity like that. There were probably about 50 people in the world that knew what it was, and it was very much just a testing ground for your movement capabilities and to see if you could apply those skills in the real world, to achieve difficult tasks. So there was no competitive element in it at all. It wasn't even the idea that it could be a competition. It was purely a test of your body and mind, personally, and that's what drew me to it. Yeah, the idea of competition has only come up in parkour very kind of pretty recently, and with the involvement of various kind of sporting organizations wanting to look at it as a possibility to make it a sport, but that back then there was no idea of that.
Yeah, can you tell us a bit about the sport in general? The history where it came from, and how you got into it, and sort of how you saw it develop until what it is today.
Yeah, sure. So parkour sort of grew up in the 1990s, really, in the suburbs of Paris, with a group of friends and a couple of families that had different influence from martial arts, from gymnastics, acrobatics, from the method naturelle of Georges Hébert, and from the New Caledonian tribal culture through the Hanotra family. And they sort of, these young individuals, men and women, although now there's kind of recognized as 9 male sort of founders, but back in the day there were more than 9, and there were women involved in that too. They were just exploring their space and really challenging themselves physically and mentally to try and do things, and not necessarily do amazing movement skills, but to see sort of how strong physically and mentally they could be, and how resilient. And so they would do things like really long distance runs, run from one city to another, or can we climb this mountain? Can we carry this rock from here to here? Can we get from this building to another building? Just sort of really testing themselves in that way, in a very raw, unfocused fashion. And over time, it began to focus and began to sort of crystallize around these sort of 9 individuals that called themselves Yamakasi, which means strong body, strong mind, strong spirit, and it's a Lingala word. And those guys are kind of recognized now as the founders. And they sort of crystallized it into what it is and gave it the name art du déplacement, the art of displacement. And after that, it was renamed parkour and then renamed free running. But they're effectively just different names through history for the same thing. And it was very underground for many, many years, and then exploded in the early noughties, kind of 2001, 2002, with a Luc Besson film called Yamakasi, and then a Channel 4 documentary called Jump London in the UK, and a BBC ident called Rush Hour with one of the founders. Those sort of media moments catapulted it really into the mainstream consciousness, and thousands of people started wanting to learn it and train it and took it up overnight. And I remember the forums went from sort of 100 or 200 people online talking about it around the world total to kind of 10,000 people overnight once Jump London aired on Channel 4. So it was suddenly catapulted into the limelight, and it's developed from there. Really, we then started teaching. We started doing a lot of media work, a lot of commercial stuff, in terms of stunt work and movies and product launches and things like that. But then we were asked to teach very early on, and that really was what I was interested in. What we at Parkour Generations particularly were interested in doing was finding ways to pass on the benefits of this discipline to anyone that wanted to learn, because it was pretty exclusive until then. There was no real way to access it unless you could track down one of the founders or one of the second generation and train with them or train with us, and that was it. There was no it wasn't accessible, and we wanted it to be accessible. So we devised the sort of the academy and the teaching structures and the coaching certifications to build on that.
Yeah. Okay. So you got involved after seeing this one of these documentaries, or did you come across one of those founding members, or?
Yeah, so I first saw the movie Yamakasi, Luc Besson film, in I think it's 2001. Then I saw the BBC Ident with David Bell, one of the founding guys, 2002 maybe, and kind of around that time that I got very, very interested in who they were and what that was, because I could tell that it wasn't special effects. They weren't using ropes; they were actually doing those movements, and that was really interesting for me because I'd never seen anyone do that before. So I sort of started trying to track them down, and eventually found the very fledgling UK community. There were 5 or 6 people training back then, and through them access the French, the founding guys in France, the first and second generation practitioners, and there was some small interaction between the UK and France at that stage. Some of the French guys would come across, and there would be sort of an exchange of knowledge, and we would learn as much as we could from those guys, and that's when I got into it. That's how I sort of started studying, and I was lucky enough early on to meet Stéphane Vigru, one of the very early practitioners, and became good friends with him and trained with him a lot. And then he was one of the co-founders of Parkour Generations with me. So that was kind of my entrance into it, I guess. And that was in the early days. That was the only way into it, was to try and access those original French practitioners and learn with them.
Yeah, okay. So you've been active for 15 years now, and when you look on YouTube now and you look up these videos, you see a lot of them. How important has that social media aspect been for the sport, and do you think it has somehow changed with like companies like Red Bull coming in and sponsoring athletes? Has that sort of taken something away from the original philosophy behind it?
Well, to the first part, the video, the communication by video, and especially when YouTube launched in 2005, I think it was, that was very important for the communication of ideas and movement concepts around the world, because it was it was a very quick way to let parkour communities in other countries know what you were doing, and people. That was the early form of communication, really. That was the early language internationally, was watching people's videos and seeing, oh wow, look at that movement, look at this, let's try that, and then you take it back to your community and try it. So it was massively important. The online video concept really was hugely important for the spread of parkour around the world. And then obviously when the media picked it up and started using it in adverts and things like that, then that just put it in front of a whole new audience. So it was very important in 2 levels, really, in terms of raising general awareness of what parkour is, and also in terms of passing on skills and concepts and methods between the parkour communities. Those videos are really, really important. And then to the second part of the question, then of course you had the brands wanting to get involved, energy drinks and commercial groups like that wanting to get involved, wanting to, I suppose, utilize and appropriate the cool factor of parkour to sell their product, and that obviously does bring about changes, and that's inevitable, I suppose, as anything goes from a tiny group to a mainstream. To something in the mainstream consciousness. Of course, there are going to be changes. There's going to be dilution, and that obviously happened. There are variations that grew up, and those competitions that came about. If you talk to, I suppose, parkour practitioners that really take the discipline seriously and understand it, they would say that they're not parkour competitions. That you can't have a parkour competition. It's kind of a contradiction in terms, and those are just approximations of parkour. They're kind of like more gymnastic versions, or more like a crude gymnastics competition or crude acrobatics competition than a parkour competition. So there was definitely a change to the perception of parkour as a result.
Okay.
That's kind of inevitable, I suppose.
Yeah, in a way, always his was with growing sports. You talked about Parkour Generations, so this whole institute that you put up, and you travel around the world and you go teach parkour and everything, and you guys are running and climbing and jumping and all sorts of stuff, so obviously that physical aspect is quite important. You definitely need to train your body, but you also need to train your mind. It's the mental part is quite big as well, I suppose. I mean, it's not a risk-free sport. I mean, you're dealing with heights, you're dealing with fear that you have to overcome. How do you train for both? How do you prepare the people that follow your courses? How do you train them for both these aspects of parkour?
Yeah, it's good. It's a good question, and obviously, firstly, it is yes, it's very physical, but it's way more mental. Parkour is massively psychological and mental, and in a way, anyone training in anything to a high level comes to understand that their discipline is all psychological. The physical is kind of something that follows the mind. So parkour is really about training the whole individual, and that means training the mind. The body will follow. The body will get strong just through repeated movement, repeated training. So, but it's the mind that allows that and tells you where you can go and what you can do and unlocks your potential. So, parkour is really all mental. In terms of risk-free sport, I mean, tell me, what is a risk-free sport? All sport and all activity has risk, and parkour, statistically speaking, parkour is way safer than football or rugby or horse riding. Horse riding is the number one risk sport in the UK, 200 deaths a year on average. So those are far riskier than parkour, I would say. But yeah, we like any athletic discipline, there are risks to the kind of movements we're doing. And just running and jumping and using your body in a powerful way. So there's going to be risks of sprains and tears and things like that. So the way we deal with it is through a really good, solid understanding of biomechanics, and really learning and teaching how the body can do these movements and get stronger by doing them, rather than doing them and being broken down by them. And that really comes down to technique, comes down to experience, it comes down to quality of movement. And that's pretty much what we teach. I mean, that our education is all based on the quality of movement and learning how to unlock your kind of instinctive movement again through the mind, so that your body adapts to space well and moves without getting injured, and isn't deconstructed so much that it stops moving. Which is what's happened to a lot of many aspects of the fitness industry. For example, now they deconstruct so much that they actually hinder their athletes' ability to move and promote injury. So parkour is very much not about that. It's not about tapering or peaking for competition. It's about training, to be and to last, as we would say. So training for the whole of your life to be healthy, fit, strong, and to just get stronger and healthier and fitter as you go through the years. So it's very much about quality of movement.
Yeah. You often talk about an holistic part of an holistic approach to training. Does that also include nutrition?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, again, we one of our favorite sayings is train the individual, not just the athlete. And to train the whole individual, that means helping them understand what is best for their body mind over the course of their whole life. And of course, that involves what you put in it. That involves the fuel that you're giving yourself for your training. So we definitely encourage people to understand that and to begin applying it. And normally, when you take up a discipline like parkour seriously, pretty early on, you will realize that what you are eating and what you are drinking has an effect on your training, and either makes your recovery, better or worse, or makes your performance better or worse. So pretty early on, people automatically are driven to change their eating habits, and the parkour community generally eats pretty healthily. Most people avoid alcohol. I don't really know any serious practitioners that smoke. It kind of just automatically drives you towards a healthier approach to living, because there's such demand on the body physically that it needs it. It needs the protein, it needs the good carbs, it needs the macronutrients, and it needs hydration, and it doesn't want the toxins. So it kind of forces it in a way. So yeah, train the whole individual, and that means looking at your diet as well as your activity and your rest.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So yeah, you started in 2002, so you've been at it for a while. With all due respect, can a 40-ish-year-old body do the same as a 25-year-old, or do you find new challenges as you get older?
Yeah, I mean, you're changing. Training evolves as you get older, and it should, because you should get more experience. So my training now is different from when I first started training. Thank God, because I've got 15 years of experience, so I'm much more effective at training now. Pretty much at my age, I can do pretty much everything that I could do when I was 25. I don't really notice much decline, and I'm a big believer in I think Bruce Lee said that a man's physical peak should be around the age of 40, and I kind of agree with that. I think that the idea that the peak is 18, 19, or 20 is basically down to statistics that come from school, that come from our society's structures in terms of when you finish school, you typically finish sport. So everything has the sporting population at best at 18, 19, because that's when they're doing sport. And then after that, they go to work and they stop doing sport. So they will become unfit. But in my experience, I know plenty of people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, even 60s who are monstrously fit and powerful and strong with great endurance, great movement skill. So I think that I don't think you should be dropping off at that age. And I think if you are, then it means your training is you've either been overtraining and damaged yourself, or your training just isn't that smart. So yeah, at the moment I'm fine and I'm enjoying that. And whatever you begin to lose as you get older, as you go through your 40s and 50s, you're going to lose a bit of plyometric ability, a bit of explosive power and stuff. Yes, you're going to lose some of that, but you're going to be able to balance that out with the experience of training and the experience of movement. So I think there's always a natural balance as you go through your life.
Do you guys also train a lot in the gym, or is it just purely you train your body by doing the movements that you do?
We do both. I mean, we predominantly it's movement training, but in a way all whether it's gym based or outdoor based or whatever, it's all movement training, right? A bicep curl is a movement. It's just the flexion and an extension of the elbow joint and with the muscles around it. So it's all movement, and we just look at making all the movement as high quality as we can. And yes, if we want to add resistance training to get stronger in a certain chain, then yeah, back squats, front squats, all this sort of stuff. Fantastic deadlifts, a really useful carryover to what we do. So we do that, we teach that, we train that as well. But those are all supplements. I mean, the main function of the human body, pretty much unarguably, is to adapt and move over different terrain. That's the function of the human body, is to carry the brain over different terrain, right? So that should be the majority of your training, I believe, because that's what your body is for. And anything else should supplement and support and make that better and more efficient. But if the supplement becomes the main thing, then I think there's then it's a specialization that's kind of lost you've missed the wood for all the trees sort of thing. So yeah, I think it's mainly the movement training that I'm interested in, and that I think has the best benefit. And then we supplement with whatever we need to.
Okay. Well, tell us a bit about Parkour Generations and the philosophy behind it. I mean, you're just back from Brazil, so you're always almost global with the entire organization. Tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a crazy ride, really. It's been 10 years. I think we started in 2007, and with just three of us. Me and two of the French guys, and from there it kind of just exploded really very quickly. And the way we were structuring things and the way we were able to teach things appealed to a lot of people, basically. And we very quickly got the buy-in of local authorities and sports organizations and governments who could see that it was a really healthy thing to do. And we started teaching in schools and working for local authorities, and that sort of again helped it grow. We started running the Parkour Generations Academy, so just classes for the public to come and join, which were hugely populated right from the start. And that grew, that expanded in the UK really quickly. And then fairly early on, we wanted to take it to other countries. We were invited to teach all over the world, so we started doing that. And then when we were in those countries, seeing the communities grow, they wanted access to more regular training. So we started setting up the branches around the world, in USA and Brazil and South Korea, in Taiwan and wherever they are now. So so it's kind of gone pretty global, which is really cool because we get to travel and meet amazing communities and learn about their cultures and learn about their way of training and way of moving as well. And it's been an amazing experience in that way. So it's always growing, and parkour is pretty strong in many countries, but there are still many countries where it's very small and hardly known about. And so we're very interested in helping those small communities get a foothold and grow and spread the discipline where they are. So there's still a lot of work to do.
Yeah, okay. And the fact that you've traveled so much, has that somehow affected the way that you look at life?
I guess so, yeah. I mean, I've always been interested in travel. I lived in Japan when I finished university. I was living in Japan for 5 years. I've always been interested in traveling and exploring the world, and parkour has taken me to more than 40 countries, I guess, over the last 10 years, and most of them multiple times. So I've been through some passports, and yeah, learning about those cultures and those. I think it's hugely important. I think travel is something that everyone should do at a young age. In your mid-teens, late teens, everyone should be traveling the world and seeing other cultures, because it just changes your perspective and makes you realize that your culture is just one amongst many. Makes you see the strengths of your culture, but also the weaknesses, and makes you realize that effectively all humans are the same the world over, have the same desires, the same passions, the same fears, the same frustrations, and they're all just trying to get by. So I think it's a really useful thing to do, and I still love traveling, love seeing the world, and I'm really aware how lucky I am to have seen so many different cultures, and have so many good friends in so many different countries, and then to be able to link them together and bring them together. One of the things we do at Parkour Generations a lot is cross-pollinate our branches. So we'll have guys from Brazil come and teach in the UK. We'll have guys from the UK go and teach and live in America. We'll have guys from the UK go and live in Asia and the branches there and work there. And the Asian guys go to Brazil. And so there's a real mixing of the cultures within Parkour Generations, and that's really awesome too, because then they can take what they've learned back to their training group, their community, and spread that. So, and that just it's the law of requisite variety in biology. Which is basically the more variety there is within a pool of organisms, the stronger and healthier it'll be. So we really encourage that, and I'm super lucky to have been able to travel so much.
Yeah, I think a lot of the listeners can really relate to that. I mean, a lot of them travel as well to different continents to do races, so definitely help them to see the bigger things. Now, yeah, a lot of the listeners are probably riding a bike or running at the moment. Do you think some of them can benefit from incorporating some type of parkour training into their own training? Oh
yeah, absolutely. I mean, parkour is kind of in a way, it's the foundation of human movement, right? In a way, it's the grandfather discipline, because it's basically the main motor skills of the human body: running, jumping, climbing, crawling, swinging, vaulting, brachiating. Those are really foundational movement patterns, and that's what the body is meant to do, all of them, right? You're not designed just to do one. You're not designed just to run in a single direction. You're not designed to arguably you're not designed to cycle a bike at all, but you're not designed just to cycle. You're not designed just to crawl. You're not designed just to jump. You're designed to do it all. And the more variation you get in that, Michel Daukel, the founder of Viper, a friend of mine, he says his line is variability of movement is health. And that's absolutely right. So even if you do specialize in running or cycling or triathlon or something like that, the more variety you put into your training, the stronger your overall physical base will be, and the less likely you will be to be injured. That's probably the most important thing for those athletes, is that the variety creates a balance in the kinetic chains and the tissue strengths in the body. And that variety helps prevent the injuries. And that I think is incredibly useful. A good friend of mine who was a very elite USA triathlete, Jessie Stensland, back in the day, one of the original kind of elite professional triathletes. She's now, a movement athlete, took up parkour a few years ago when I first met her, and teaches natural movement and barefoot training. And she would absolutely swear by it as being the thing that has physically improved her and physically saved her from the injuries that she was accumulating from being a very kind of linear athlete doing triathlon, linear repetitive athlete. So I think it's a really useful thing to do, and it's the main benefit is going to be the long-term health implications it's going to have, long-term health benefits it's going to have for those athletes that do want to specialize in something like running or cycling.
Yeah, okay. So do you have any really precise tips for anyone who might be interested in giving it a go? And I mean, how can they get involved?
So the way to get involved, like anything, is seek out good guidance. Seek out good coaches, good communities that know what they're doing, that understand the discipline, and train with them. You can always get access to those communities through us in the countries that we are in, or through our sort of online coaching programs. We do that too. So pretty much wherever you are, you should be able to get access to some of that knowledge. And some of the communities that teach parkour really well. I would say do that rather than go to YouTube and just try and copy what you see. That's kind of a recipe for disaster. And you would never learn any discipline by doing that. So I would definitely say find a good coach, someone that has experienced the discipline for a long time, and ask them to show you where to start. And then get out and begin applying your skills to the environment, and adapt. The body is for adaptation. So utilize it for that, and it will thank you. It will like it. It's kind of the movement nutrition that it wants, is that variation. So give it that, and it will definitely thank you for it.
All right, perfect. Well, thanks for your time, Dan. How can people get in touch with you if they want to?
Well, the best way to reach us is always through parkourgenerations.com, and just drop us an email there, or find us on all the social media channels that we have. We're pretty easy to find online, and as I say, we have branches around the world, so head there and you'll be able to find all our different education programs and workshops and upcoming events, and all that sort of stuff, and come down and get involved. We'd love to see you.
All right, perfect. I'll put those links up on the show notes page on the website, junkiepodcast.com. You got some sponsors or some partners that you work with?
We work closely with Tasmanian Tiger, who are a great sponsor. They sponsor our tactical department. We have a sort of tactical department that works with military and police. And Tasmanian Tiger are a fantastic tactical equipment company based in Germany. They supply a lot of the gear for the German Special Forces. And they're really, really cool partners of ours. We have a lot of great partners, but those guys we'd like to give a special shout out to. They're supporting a lot of our events at the moment. So yeah, we always have great partners, and Scotch Lipstick's another one we'd like to mention, which is a pure parkour clothing company that we work closely with and sponsor our rendezvous events around the world. Also really, really cool training gear, really original, really bespoke for movement. So give those guys a shout out, that'd be great.
All right, cool. Anything else you want to plug?
I'd say at the moment, probably for this audience, one of the things that might be very interesting for them is what we call the Parkour Fitness Specialist program, which is an education program for fitness professionals and trainers really who want to understand these concepts of complex dynamic movement and parkour mobility and strength ideas, and bring them into their own training in their clients' program. The Parkour Fitness Specialist is been around for a couple of years, but it's now getting a lot of attention. It's ramping up. There's a whole new website coming, and the courses are starting to run around the world pretty regularly. So that's a really good way if you're a trainer or you're just a fitness professional who's interested in adding to your repertoire. Then that education program is probably the best way to access that sort of knowledge very efficiently. So that's probably one thing that would be useful for your audience.
All right, cool. Well, one big one to finish it off. What do you see as your biggest achievement in your career so far, and what's your biggest regret?
Yeah, big questions. Biggest achievement, I think, is a tough one. I've been asked that before, and I think the biggest achievement that in my career is probably getting together the amazing people that we have in the team and that we have around the world. I mean, bringing those guys together and being able to work with them and helping them develop their passion. For me, that's the most important thing that I've been able to do, and getting to work with them every day is a really, really cool thing, because they're just such dedicated, diligent, effective people, and also incredible, high level athletes who are just very, very humble as well about what they do, and yet are just phenomenally skilled. So I think bringing groups of people like that together is really rewarding, and that's probably what I'm most sort of proud of, I guess.
I can imagine.
Biggest regret, I tend not to live with regrets very much. I think that if you're happy with who you are as a person, then you can't really have a regret, because everything you've done, even the mistakes you've made, and I've made plenty of mistakes, even those things have led you to who you are and to where you are. So if you're happy with who you are and where you are, and I am, then you shouldn't really have a regret. So I don't really think I have any regrets, actually. I've done lots of things very badly and very inefficiently and made loads of mistakes. But
you learn, yeah.
I don't really regret them, because they taught me things I needed to learn. So it's all good.
Makes total sense. Thanks for your time, Dan.
No problem, Peter. Thanks very much for the call. Really, really, really good talking to you.
All right. Thanks for listening to this episode with Dan Edwards. Now, if you like what you just heard and don't want to miss any future episode, then please head over to iTunes or Stitcher and subscribe to the show. And while you're at it, and if you have some spare time, please leave me a rating and a review. That will really help grow the show. You can also have a look at all the show notes on the website, junkiepodcast.com, and there's also a contact section at the bottom of the page. So feel free to send me an email if you have any ideas for improvement or suggestions for future guests. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you'll join me next time.